Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome everyone who's here with physical presence in Rethymno, and I would like to welcome everyone on Zoom. This is the TALOS second PhD meeting, featuring the presentations by TALOS PhD students, and also in the afternoon by TALOS visiting researchers. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the title of the presentation by Fotini Koidaki, who is the doctoral student for RT3. The title is Mapping Narrative Spaces, Literary Geography through NLP Techniques.
So, but you still see this. Let's minimize this a bit now. Okay. Can I start? I'm Fotini Koidaki. I am a PhD student here at TALOS. My research is focused on the, the beginning. My research, let's present from the beginning, is focused on the Ionian Islands prose literature of the 19th century. This group of islands has completely different historical background compared to the most Greek provinces. Historically, the Ionian Islands are the only part of the Hellenic world that did not fall under the Ottoman rule. From the 13th century onward, the Ionian Islands were under Venetian, French, British, and Russian dominion. So the Ionian, along with the Venetian and British rule, influenced the narrative space and themes in the Ionian prose fiction. However, the Ionian Islands were always connected geographically and culturally with the rest of Greece. They have looked upon as a threshold of the cross-cultural communication between Europe and Greece. And did this special geopolitical position influence the tone and the topics of the prose fiction? Interesting questions that connects the space and the narrative, aren't they? Does the 19th century prose fiction from Ionian Islands constitute a distinct literary area connected to the region's unique culture? And most importantly, can we talk about Ionian prose fiction? Literary geography provides the ideal framework for addressing questions like this and exploring how space and place influence literature. In this case, it's the most suitable approach for exploring the relationship between the Ionian's geographical context and the literature produced during that time. Literary geography isn't merely about mapping locations. It's a set of methods for analyzing the profound ways that real or imagined spaces shape narrative structures, themes, and characters. But to be more precise, is a whole scientific area, which, according to Sheila Holmes, is difficult to define because of its four-way structure. We can see here the four-way structure of the literary geography. The literary refers to literary text and also to literary studies, while the geography includes not only the geographies of the lived world and spatial concepts, but also human geography as an academic discipline. I'll agree with Sheila Holmes that literary geography is an interdisciplinary practice and approach. But to give you a more comprehensive picture, I could add that literary geography is a subfield of the part of a larger field that is called literary spatial studies, which is coming under an even larger umbrella, the spatial humanities or the geo-humanities. Here, there is an attempt of mine to visualize the tree of spatial humanities that incorporates several subfields, as you can see, that deal with spatial dimensions of human culture and history. Literary spatial studies focuses on literature's spatial aspects and consists of various spatial approaches, like literary geography, literary cartography, narrative mapping, spatial poetics. Here's a closer look at the differences that focuses on how space is described and constructed, on the visual mapping, on the character's movement, or examines the literary language of space with spatial poetics. But literary spatial studies as a whole tree, it is not it is in constant evolution. So let's take a look at this evolution. Let's have a look on a flashback. Even though literary cartography emerged as a discipline in the discipline practice in the 20th century, its roots trace back to earlier interest in how place shapes literary works. In the 19th century, literature began to closely intertwine with place and landscape. Romantic and Victorian literature portrayed natural space as reflection of human experience, symbolic of emotional and moral stages. Henry Sharp's literary geography is often considered the first work to systematically explore the importance of geography in literary texts, analyzing how real and imagined landscapes shapes narratives. However, the field gained academic traction in the mid-20th century with an increased interest in spatial theory from geography, sociology, and humanities. Scholars like Yves introduced concepts like topophilia that emphasize the emotional connections people have with places. The spatial term located between 70s and 90s emphasized the connection of space, place, and society. Foucault's and Lefebvre's ideas about that space is a social construction led to deeper explorations of how literature affects and reflects constructs and challenges social and cultural understandings of space. As we approach the zeros, we observe that the study of space in literature is getting formalized. In 1998, Moretti published his atlas, which pioneered spatial data analysis in literary studies, and Westphal's geocriticism introduced the multidisciplinary study of narrative space, incorporating perspectives from geography, history, and sociology. And this is when digital humanities began to intersect with literary geography. Digital mapping tools, geographic information systems, GIS, and deep mapping techniques allowed for sophisticated spatial analysis of text, facilitating projects that visualize character movements, narrative spaces, and even fictional geographies. Recent work emphasizes the global and transcultural dimensions of literary space, focusing on how literature reflects the global flows, migrations, and network of meanings. So, let's go to the digital part. Although traditional literary geography focuses on close reading or even initiates from close reading to produce distant mappings, digital tools enables us to handle extensive collections like the 19th century Ionian novels, for example, and allow us to detect spatial patterns and structure that might be impossible to find with manual reading. Thus, DH tools allow for both macroanalysis and microanalysis and uncover cultural and historical context. They also can help link geographic data with historical and cultural contexts, providing a richer interpretation of text. For example, mapping the geography of Ionian prose alongside historical events or cultural references can shed light on how these influences appear in literary narratives. And now it's perfect time for a little bit brainstorming. Here are the three very interesting projects that I chose for you today. Chronotopic cartographies, the emotions of London, and the mapping the lakes. The first and the third are developed by Lancaster University, while the second, the emotions of London, constructed by Stanford Literary Lab, which our head of department, Professor Natsina, is connected with. This project, the Emotions of London, maps the emotional associations of various London locations as depicted in the 18th century and 19th century novels. It utilized crowdsourcing and GIS systems in order to chart the affective significance of place names. The first project and the third are you can find them on very attractive websites. You can discover various maps and also tools. In the first, which draws from Mikhail Bakhtin's concept of the chronotope. The third is developed also by Lancaster University, employs NLP to analyze and map geographical references in 19th and 19th century Lake District literature. Interactive maps there enables users to visualize and compare the spatial representations in different literary works. So these three projects demonstrate the innovative integration of digital tools. So let's take a look at the core digital humanities techniques and tools for literary geography. Of course, the first technique is the textual analysis, the traditional close reading that allows us to explore the language of the narrative space. I will come to this later, explaining why it is an integral part, in my opinion, of any literary analysis effort, at least at the level of sampling. The role of NLP, natural language processing, here is to extract and analyze linguistic data, especially geographic and spatial information, while GIS visualize and map the spatial data extracted from the texts. GIS also enables us layering. The layering of spatial data make it possible to view multiple spatial dimensions simultaneously, such as historical, financial, or other. This capability are ideal for creating detailed spatial representations of narrative locations. Look like this, the representations. We could mention some key tools here, such as QGIS or AR, QGIS, or even better, some deep mapping platforms like Palladio or Recogito, but I save it for future meetings, and I will come to the visualization analysis tools that are designed to provide a user-friendly way to visualize mainly numerical data, to highlight trends, relationships, and patterns, something like this. So let's focus on the NLP part. In the context of literary geography, NLP techniques help automate the analysis of vast corpora, allowing researchers to detect patterns, exact their spatial references, and analyze themes related to place and space in literature. Here, I summarize the key NLP tasks that could be used on literary geography, and I reflect on how they could serve my research about Ionian prose fiction of the 19th century. I will not go into very technical details. I just say that NAR, name entity recognition, identifies and classifies proper nouns in text, such as names of persons, locations, organizations, and much more. NRP in literary geography is mainly used for location extraction, but extracting locations help map geographic references. Is used to identify mentions. It could use to identify mentions of Ionian locations or other locations, helping me to discover the spatial setting of narrative in the Ionian prose fiction. Here. Topic modeling is, as we all know, the unsupervised technique that discovers the dominant themes within a text or a corpus. In literary geography, topic modeling can uncover spatial themes related to specific places, and thus it can show us the themes that cluster around specific places. For instance, it might reveal recurring themes that connect the Ionian literature with the region, like autonomy, colonial, or isolation, and probably others that we cannot even imagine right now. Sentiment analysis determines the emotional tone expressed in a text by detecting the polarity between positive, negative, or neutral. In literary geography, by examining sentiments tied to specific locations, we can explore the emotion landscape associated with places. For example, text might show positive sentiment toward the Ionian territory or negative sentiment associated with Athens, for example, after 1864, when the islands officially reunited with Greece. Syntax analysis or dependency parsings aims to analyze the grammatical structure of sentences to understand relationships between words. In literary geography helps reveal the context of geographic entities in relations to other elements of the text. This can show, for example, how often characters interact with particular places in the Ionian region, or the adjectives that are connected with specific regions. The entity linking is used to link recognized geographic names in text to real-world locations. This technique enhances the accuracy of locations mapping by associating literally places with actual geographic coordinates. For the Ionian Islands, entity linking can help clarify whether Corfu, for example, refers to the island itself or a particular area on it. And finally, co-occurrences and network analysis examines how frequently specific entities or terms appear together within texts. By examining these co-occurrences, researchers can map relationships between characters, locations, themes, or other elements and building a network of connections and reflect. For instance, analyzing which locations are often mentioned together in Ionian prose, we could suggest social connections. So let's come to my research. Let's focus on the case of the 19th century Ionian novels and discuss a little about my literary geographies and my issues here. This is an overall workflow of my research, and today's topic, as well as my work over the last 2 months, focuses on the upper branch of this flowchart, the purple one, on which I aim to create a gazetteer, as I call it, but in this case, in Ionian fiction, it won't be just a list of locations extracted from the 19th century novels. It will be more like a tabular database of the literary spatial data extracted and retrieved from the whole corpus. The discovered locations will be enriched with documents, information, and will be organized in a tabular database that will enable me further analyze the spatial spectrum of the 19th century Ionian prose fiction. Let's see my progress. Let's give you an overview of my progress. I think now I've managed to digitize every single title of my initial catalog. I just missed some pages from a certain book. I've also trained my own OCR model, thankfully, on the Transcribers platform out of my handcrafted data. On both tags, I had support and help of valued colleagues. There are many names and many details about the corpus and the OCR model, but I'm saving them for relevant papers that I hope to publish during 25. So the last few months, and while the OCR digitization is still running, I'm focusing on cleaning my data and extracting the locations out of them. The main script that you can see with the heart and the train. So about the pre-process, starting from cleaning the data, I wrote a pre-processing script that aim to denoise the OCR results. Text denoising is a crucial step in NLP, even more so if the textual data are coming from an OCR pipeline. Denoising can enhance the final results of text mining, since it emphasizing removing the noise that is produced not only by the OCR process, but also by the other internal or external factors, like the noise is coming from the text formatting artifacts, the typos, the abbreviations, or scanning processes. So our first priority here is to define the noise, and then a series of steps for the removal of it, keeping always in mind that we don't want to lose data, but we want to clean data. In my case, I observed that noise is created by the OCR mistakes, but more frequently it is caused by the text formatting artifacts, the scanning processes, headers, footers, page numbers, chapters, numberings, line breaks, for instance, or the finger of the person who scanned the book. My cleaning pipeline works like this. I remove the empty lines. I remove the lines that contain only symbols, maybe mixed with spaces and some numbers, the lines that contain only numbers, the lines that contain only capitals, and this is how I remove headers. I normalize the hyphenation when the word break, when the line break and word break, and then I unify words. And finally, I convert the text to monotonic. Why I should do this? Why I convert the text to monotonic? For example, these 4 words that are the left of the arrow are recognized as different tokens, different words, but all are variations of the same word, Athens. Some of them are misspelled because of many reasons. Misspelling is something that we should predict since we process OCR texts. Having cleaned my text, the next step is to extract the locations. And as for the Greek language of the 19th century, it's a lot harder than it sounds. I had to compare how different models perform on my data and then choose whether I would go with a pre-trained option or train a new model, my model. Tough choice. The models, as you can see, I tested different models and tools. I also personally fine-tuned 2 models on the left, orange circle. The Natural Language Toolkit on the right circle, the NLTK provides foundational tools for preprocessing natural language, but its capabilities are typically oriented toward English texts, and its accuracy with other languages like Greek is limited. It's useful for rule-based and regular expression-based approaches. As regards NER tasks, such as location extraction, NLTK is versatile. It provides basic tools for tokenizing and regular expressions, which can be tailored for specific locations and patterns. So its general purpose NER models lack the depth to handle the archaic language of the 19th century Greek novels. SPACI, on the other hand, offers pre-trained model for NER in Greek in various languages, and is popular for its speed and accuracy on a range of entity types. It has an available pre-trained model for Greek in 3 sizes, large, small, and medium. I use the large, Elkhorn use large, LG, that is suitable for basic location extraction. So NER of SPACI are focused on modern Greek language, but they can be customized and extended either by fine-tuning or by label data by adding custom patterns with entity ruler. As you can see there, entity ruler is not training. It's a rule-based approach. This means that it does not improve the ability of the model to recognize unseen locations. It's a component of SPACI, very powerful, I believe, that could work alongside with existing models to enhance their accuracy. These patterns are regular expressions and token-based rules that match exact phrases or specific syntactic structures in entity ruler. So it does not directly improve the model's ability to recognize the unseen data. However, it is useful for enhancing models' performance with domain-specific or custom entities. BERT is a state-of-the-art transformer-based models for NER, particularly in handling context-heavy tasks like location extraction in complex texts. Fine-tuning BERT for location extraction involves training on annotated locations to optimize performance for specific language and domains. Although there are 3 models available they focus on either modern Greek or ancient Greek language. I used the 2 of them and I got results of poor quality. So I use them again as basis for fine-tuning. You will see later. ChatGPT now 4 operates as a conversational model, as we know, and does not require training for location extraction. You can give it your document and ask it to return your locations. It can handle location extraction tasks in complex or historical Greek sentences. It has strong ability to understand the context, and it works wonderfully. I got the most beautiful displayed results ever here. But comparing with my fine-tuned SPACI model, it lost 2 tokens. And for the time being, I would choose not to use it as my main NRE location extraction tool because of 2 reasons. ChatGPT does not support custom training, and it consumes 25 more energy than Google search. So I wonder how sustainable it would be for me to base my research on a high-cost chatbot. It is ideal, though, for exploratory tasks or insights into context-rich locations. So if I have to feed the ChatGPT-4 with kind of my training data, or if I have to form an entity ruler with my list of locations, I think it's much better to spend this time fine-tuning my own model, which will be personalized in the 19th century Greek language and which I can use locally and independently and even share it within community. With that in mind, I trained 2 models, my SPACI model and my BERT model. That said, I won't go into further details. Let's take a look at my results. As I said earlier, I tested all these models. On your screens, you can see the results of the model that required no training. At the bottom, I give you the names of the relevant models and tools. Sometimes I say tools because ChatGPT is not a model, it's a tool. And among the results, you can also see my notes. NLTK, in NLTK, I encountered a lot of noise. If you can take a look, close look. To evaluate the accuracy, I use specific document, which served as evaluation data. It's a historic novel by Andreas Savouris that was published in 1896. Every single results are from the same book of the Andreas Savouris. We could reduce the noise, some of the noise in NLTK by removing stopwords. This is the method. But still, I would have a lot of noise because if we look closer, we will see that many of the unwanted results are verbs, nouns, adverbs, and other words that are not included in a regular stopword list. Also, we can see the label null at the right side of its entity, which means that NLTK cannot classify spatial information between GPE and location. While at the other, all the other results are labeled as GPEs, but they include less noise. The second column is the results I got from the space enlarged pre-trained Greek model. It is decent, but I know that there are more spatial locations in the text that I analyzed. The third column shows the very disappointing results of my entity ruler. Even though my expectations were low, this is not good if we consider that I created a huge entity ruler with hundreds of locations. Although I included all the locations stated in Wikipedia for Greek territories, for Europe, for America, it was only expected to give poor results since my ruler is made out of modern Greek words, modern Greek language entities. On the other hand, ChatGPT-4 looks wow. The results here are free of noise and well organized and even somehow linked with their actual geospatial entities, as you can see in the parentheses at the right side. But let's take a look on the results of my trained models here. On the left side, there are now displayed the results of my space model. I named it my space model. And which is the model that extracted the most entities that any other model did. Next to that, we see the same results of the retained space model as before. And right after, you can see a screenshot of my Google Colab, where I trained my BERT model. As you can see my notes, more training data are needed here, many locations. Wow, perfect, but I should reduce the noise. There are some noise in the first column. So let's focus on the training. I would not go into technical details. The two models, Spacey and BERT, operate differently, and thus they have different fine-tuning pipelines. I should note here that the same training data was used for fine-tuning of both models. In fact, I used 252 training samples that were labeled only with the general geospatial entity locations. In order to address issues of low quality and noisy results that I have encountered in the past in other similar projects, I decided to use training data from the 19th century Ionian corpus, and most importantly, to process them with the initial pre-processing denoising script. You remember the denoising script, my pipeline? In this way, the model is trained on a language that is much closer to the ancient OCR data than it would be if we have trained it on an original Greek text of the 19th century. However, to avoid over-customization and have a sustainable model that other people can use later, I duplicated my training data, which in the beginning included only 126 sentences. I kept the duplicate and of the other 126 untouched in polytonic original version of the 19th century text. By doing that, I multiplied my training samples and I included both polytonic and normalized versions in my training data. I would like to share some of my notes on both training dependencies and features. I currently work to create a larger training set. Of course, BERT requires many more training data because the models is relying on context to differentiate entities. The minimum recommended sample for fine-tuning BERT is 1,000 to 2,000, and I only use 252. On the other hand, Spacey can be effective with 500 to 1,000 annotated sentences. I think that my fine-tuned model extracted all the entities included in the document. The only problem here was the noise in results. To reduce the noise, I need not only to have more training samples, but also more training labels, since I observed that the noise is caused by entities, by named entities of other types, mostly by person names. I'm also not sure if the duplicate training actually helps in my corpus analysis or if it increases the entropy in my data. Finally, and before I say goodbye, I will share with you some insights and tips coming from this period of my research, which I call the second training era. The tool I use is the Label Studio for creating training data. It's free, you can use it, it's very intuitive. As I mentioned earlier, I use Google Colab to write and share my code, mostly because I'm a Google user. There are many alternatives. Please feel free to share your experiences and the alternatives. And the tip of the day, I'm about to use ChatGPT for generating training data. Remember this? Take a look here. It asks me if I want to have the results in CONLL 2003 file. These files are the files that are used for training our models, and this file is the file that I export from the Label Studio. So I plan to increase my number of the original 19th century training data by using this service and multiply my training data with the lowest possible energy and cost. Of course, this couldn't be precise on the OCR and pre-processed data, but it could be used for generating training data from the original 19th century texts. And I think that I've said enough for today. This list of URLs are some of the more or less known papers and books that you can access for free online. The two books introduce spatial humanities and literary geography, while the paper discusses projects that stand at the intersection of them with NLP technologies. And the last one is the Greek academic textbook published by Kalipos Publications, named Space and Narrative, Narrative and Space, that provides a theoretical overview on the large spectrum of spatial literary approaches. And right now,
let me announce our next speaker, who is Evangelos Katis, or Vangelis, who is a PhD candidate for the for RT4, and the title is An Alternative Approach to Ontology-Based Curriculum Development in Higher Education.
I can see from here, Rafael, thank you. I'm going to be in the start of my PhD work, so I'm going to present a journal article that looks quite interesting for me and for my work. It's naturally that titled An Alternative Approach to Ontology-Based Curriculum Development in Higher Education. The main info for this article is by three authors, two professors and one more from two universities in Thailand. Well, the first one is has a quite difficult name for me, but I'm going to try to pronounce it. Patamaporne Pidiyambut Pat, difficult name, although, and the second one, Sally Goldin, and then Nad Diharoen. Three of them from my university from Thailand. The title is, as said before, An Alternative Approach to Ontology-Based Curriculum Development in Higher Education, published in 2024 in the journal Smart Learning Environments. Where the main subject of the work is to implement an approach for representing curriculum components by systematically analyzing actual source data to extract the basic knowledge, skills, and dependencies, which then become objects into an ontology. The key terms are the curriculum development, knowledge modeling, and ontology, of course. Curriculum, as we know, specifies how learning content is organized and sequenced to create a structured program of teaching and learning ready for the students. It defines a series of courses. Actually, it consists of many courses connected between each other as a formal plan that leads to achievement of the program's goal, all values. So that in the curriculum development, the developers design and organizing educational programs and content, which means that we have to set in the learning objectives, selecting the appropriate content, and determine the suite of teaching activities for that. With knowledge modeling, we mean the to create a structured representation of knowledge within a specific domain, with identifying key concepts, relationships, properties, and rules in that domain. Ontology is a quite powerful tool in knowledge modeling, because it defines a common, shareable, and reusable view of a specific domain. And it can give meaning to information structures in that domain. And with ontology, we can capture complicated relationships and supports exchange, transformation, and inference processes for them. The highlights of this work is that it's creating a curriculum ontology which comprehensively represents an actual curriculum. That it succeeded by introduces automated procedures for converting curriculum data from curricular documents into curriculum ontology. Authors uses actual curricular documents and sample data and automated methods and procedures of data extraction. At the end, they present an evaluation method with two parts, a metric one and one with evaluation forms. The expected outcome, according to the authors, of course, is an ontology which can practically and comprehensively represent the semantic content of the curriculum. And the main research question at the end, does this produced curriculum ontology provide sufficient quality in order to represent actual curriculum content in terms of fundamental curriculum components? Here we can see the methodology that the authors introduces in their work. It consists of 4 phases. In phase 1, called curriculum structure model, they identify the fundamental components which are capable of represented in the curriculum. After that, in the second phase, curriculum ontology, as they called, they present the adapted method for transforming the concept into ontology component and creating the ontology-based curriculum as a design. And after that, they go to the implementation phase that they use automated procedures for converting curriculum data from curricular documents into a curriculum ontology. And in the end, of course, there is the evaluation phase where, as I said before, they introduce 2 parts for the evaluation. 2 different processes about that, an automated one and one with evaluation forms. Let's see some more information about them. The first phase is the curriculum structure model, where the authors defines the main components of the curriculum. The curriculum, as we know, in general, defines a series of courses as a formal education plan. Central point to every curriculum are the learning objectives and the subject matter. The curriculum consists of a series of courses. Each course presents a set of learning objectives. Each one of the learning objectives consists of learning objects, nouns, plus learning behavior verbs, which indicate the intended learning outcomes for our course. Outcome or outcomes. Usually there are more. The learning objective noun corresponds to the knowledge topic, and the verb is the level of cognition for that learning objective. In the next slide, in the right picture, we can see a curriculum structure, which the purple squares are the courses, as we can see in the left picture. The green cycles are the level of cognitions. And inside of them, we can see the yellow dots, which are the topics of the course. And in the third picture here, in the bottom, one click please, we can see the three layers that the authors introduce in their curriculum ontology: the courses layer, the learning objectives layer, and the knowledge layer. Let's see three more pictures about the curriculum structure model with an example. Here we have, we use as an example the curriculum for computer science department, which we have some courses, 6 actually, and we can see that the data structures course is followed after algorithm design and continue to another course called fundamental programming. These are the courses of the computer science curriculum. In the second picture, we take the course data structure as an example, and we see that in the course outline, we have the course objectives. The first one is to understand basic components of stacks and queues. Analyzing that learning objective, let's name it LO1, we analyze it in two topics. The first topic is stacks, and the second one is queues, and is associated with LO1. Both of them are associated with LO1 with the relationships to understand, which are correspond to the cognitive level of cognition which we want about that. And in the third layer, the knowledge layer, helps us to produce the plan for how the topics are organized inside the course. The sequence of the topics are going to be taught. Here in the third picture, we can see that the topics that we mentioned before, queues and stacks, are taught after the topic trees. And after that, two topics, queues and stacks, are completed. The linked list topics is follows. After that, the completion of the curriculum ontology schema, we can see the curriculum ontology, the formalization of the ontology. The authors formalize raw curriculum data according to the curriculum structure model and converting them into curriculum ontology. Here you see a picture, an example of the three basic classes of the curriculum, which are the courses, the purple one, the learning objectives with the green circle, and the topics with the yellow circle. We see that the courses class is associated with the learning objectives with a relation has learning of, and the inverse relation in that is learned in. And the learning objectives is associated with topics with the relation has learning content of, and the inverse relation in that is content of. And since the topic is connected with another topic, we have the relation with itself, continue from, or is before the inverse one. In the table below, we see the list with domains and ranges and the object properties in our ontology. The domain topics is associated with the domain topics also, and it has the object property continue from, and the inverse one is before. The learning objectives range, it has a range of topics, and the object property has learning content of, and the courses domain that is associated with learning objective objectives with association relation has learning of. One click, please. And we see that the object property has learning content of is a super property with three sub-properties. Is able to understand, is able to apply, is able to analyze. Because the cognitive levels corresponding to the three levels of cognitive skills that outline usually in the course's outlines are to understand, to apply, to analyze. So we can use three sub-properties in order to define that more correctly. Continuing with our example now, let's see a snapshot of the ontology. The snapshot, it is a picture at the bottom. We can see that the data structure on the top of the page, we can see the two pictures that saw before in a previous slide. We can see that the course data structure has learning of LO1, learning objective 1, and the LO1 is associated with two topics, stacks and queues, like the picture at the top. With the association, the relation has learning content of, has learning content of also in both topics. The two topics, stacks and queues, are continue after the topic trees at the right of our picture, and both of them continue to the linked list topic. Like the picture that we have outlined at the picture at the top of our slide. Continue, please. After the design of the ontology, we can continue to the ontology implementation. Authors use source data as a set of documents from Thailand qualification framework. The Thailand qualification framework consists of 7 levels, TQF1 until TQF7. But the authors in this work used the first 3 of them, because the first 3 of them involve the subject element that is a key, plays key role in a curriculum ontology. The actual curriculum data that they use is from 2 bachelor programs, Bachelor of Science program in Data Science and Software Innovation, and the Bachelor of Science program in Information and Communication Technology in the mentioned university. The actual data were 2 TQF files, which 1 for each bachelor program, 24 TQF3 files, and 16 TQF3 files for the 2 bachelor programs, respectively. Let's go to the next. Authors introduced and designed actually an implementation framework in order to automatically derive curriculum ontology from the sample data. And this is achieved with a tokenization method described on a previous work called a function of Python NLP. They use programming in order to tokenize the words and the various elements that I can extract from the PDF TQF files in order to use it and build the ontology. TQF2 file is an official document that it's presenting summary information for individual curriculum. So from the TQF2 files, extracted the course codes and the course sequence. And at the top of our slide, we can see a picture of that. From the PDF file, which is the TQF2, after the processing the raw data, we can take the course codes, the course title, and the codes of the other courses, rather prerequisite or independent. And in the next slide, you can see the analysis of the TQF3 files which are each course has a TQF3 files. So the TQF3 files presenting the learning detail of each individual course. From each course, retrieve the learning objectives and the topics, as we see before. The interesting part here is that there is a connection between courses where it's constructed based on their component topics. The sequence of the courses is attained with a connection between the first topic of a course and the last topic of its prerequisite course. You can see the picture at the bottom that in the right of them, it's no meaning to write the titles. We have two courses here. The first course is in the left one, two courses with the codes. Continue, we can see that each course has two learning objectives, LO1, LO3, and LO4, and LO6. And each LO, each learning objective is connected with a relation with some topics. And we can see that the topic of the first, exactly, the 72 course is connected and continue to the first topic of the next course. Exactly, Rafael. Thank you. The result of ontology, some metrics now. The DSSI program ontology consists of 24 courses, 170 learning objectives, and 204 topics. From source data, as mentioned before, 1 TQF2 file and 2 NT4 TQF3 files, while the ICT program ontology consists of 16 courses, 126 learning objectives, and 157 topics. The last part in every ontology development is the evaluation. Here in this work, the evaluation consists of two parts. The part one measures automatically the retrieval effectiveness, which means how completely and correctly the process extracted the learning topics. For that, the precision and recall were calculated by equations. At part two, experts asked for their judgment with assessment, some evaluation forms regarding the quality and completeness of the ontology. Structured evaluation forms are used, one for each course that produced by the authors, and asked the experts to complete them. The results about the part one, the percentage of precision and recall are quite good, over 80% for precision and for recall, which is quite good. And the high value of the precision and recall suggesting that their method for deriving topics instances is practical and effective. In the second part, we can see some metrics about after the authors extract from the evaluation forms. The first one shows the value between the curriculum ontology and the revision of expert. How good is the curriculum ontology that they produced? We see that the answers of the three experts, and at the bottom of the first picture, we see the codes of the courses and the correlation coefficient for each course. Plenty of them are quite near to 100%. At the second table, you can see the factors for the evaluation forms after they produce it, the accuracy, the coverage, and the sufficiency for the curriculum ontology. How accurate is the information for the curriculum ontology? How comprehensive is that information? And how sufficient they think that this information is for the curriculum ontology. Conclusion. according to the authors. Feedbacks from the experts suggested that the poorer scores of some courses are likely due to incomplete document content. Given the ability to describe core curriculum information, the experts suggested that the curriculum ontology can be utilized in a variety of applications that could potentially improve the regular process of curriculum management. We can see here that the curriculum ontology can be used in order to verify whether the course's outlines have appropriate and adequate content. Also, it might help curriculum designers verify whether there are some missing learning objectives or topics in some courses outlines that needed to be added in order to fulfill the program requirements.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Milio. I'm a PhD candidate at TALOS as well with RT1 semantic annotation. And today I'm going to be presenting on applying a legal case owl ontology to Attic law based off of a paper by Weiner and Hoekstra, which is a legal case owl ontology with an instantiation of Popov versus Hayashi. So to start the itinerary for this presentation, I'm going to start with the current progress and status of my own research and where I think this ontology could possibly fit in. Next, I will summarize the article and explain their ontology. I will then apply their ontology to a case study from my own research corpus, which is Attic oratory. And lastly, I will draw conclusions on whether this model is adoptable for me, if its ideas are relevant, and overall my reflections on this process. So firstly, my research currently is modeling the law court speeches of Athenian oratory. And in order to do this, I have created so far 3 data sets. So the first of these is for legal processes. This is expressing the types of legal procedures that exist in classical Athenian law courts based on their procedural essential characteristics. Also, all of these are created with TEDI, which I've linked here. It's for the creation of ontoterminologies, which are terminologies with the formal conceptualization of an ontology. Yeah. The second of these is the legal bodies ontoterminology, which is describing the groups and individuals involved in the Athenian law system. And the last of these is an ontoterminology for Attic oratory overall, which is categorizing the speeches that exist, the surviving speeches based on Aristotle's rhetoric, where he outlines the categories and the essential characteristics of these. So it fits very nicely with the way an ontoterminology is created, but also then assigning authorship between these speeches with the list of potential orators that we have. So the legal processes ontoterminology, it's a lot. It's a lot to see on the screen, but I can walk through what all of these are sort of saying. So TEDI has a conceptual dimension, which is in green, and the terminological dimension, which is in blue. So here, you can see that, yeah. So these are the concepts, and then in blue, these are the English terms that align with these concepts, and these are the ancient Greek terms that align with the concepts. And these are the axes of analysis, which are essentially saying, what can if I take away from the concept, it's no longer the same concept. So the process of ancient Athenian law is very procedural, step by step. So a case will be initiated, for example, through submitting something in writing to the appropriate magistrate. The defendant will be summoned. Sometimes this is through an arrest, but sometimes this is through an announcement or a statement within the assembly, something like that. And then there's 2 separate legal bodies which will be involved: the body who tries the case, so the jury, but also the magistrate who is supervising the trial, accepting the charge, all of that. And then Also, we have things such as the penalty, whether it's assessable or it's always the same penalty, and then also what the punishment will be if the defendant is convicted. So for example, down here, this is the Thorodokias graphi. I'm working on my Greek, and this is a public indictment for accepting bribes. And you can see that it's proceeded over by the thesmothete, and it's tried before the dikasterion. And if convicted, we have an assessable penalty, which is either death or a fine of 10 times what the bribe they received was. So the second data set is representing the legal bodies that exist within this law system. And so this is a bit smaller because there are fewer, at least that are relevant at the moment. If I were to model, every body that existed in classical Athens, it would be a lot larger, but I've started just by focusing on the ones that are relevant to the court system, not just like, taxes or the military, things like that. They had officials for everything. So we have the concepts, the terms in English, the terms in ancient Greek, and these will have legal role, which is either supervising trials or judging trials are the two main categories for that. And that breaks things down into groups, which judge things, and officials who supervise. And then legal jurisdiction is the type of cases that these officials will be involved in. Selection is how these people are chosen for their role. Usually this is chosen by lot, but occasionally there are elections. Size, how many people hold this role or make up this body, and term length, almost always a year, but occasionally it's only a month. And lastly, the corpus of speeches. So within this, we have people, the people who are writing and delivering speeches, and the speeches themselves. And here we have the categories of rhetoric: deliberative, epidectic, forensic. Basically, is it a speech about the past, about the future, or about the present? And also within here, we have the objects in TEDI, which are the instances of concepts, and those are all associated with their proper names. These aren't one-to-one aligned because they're displayed alphabetically. So you can't just look across and say that they're all the same, but you can see down here that this is an object, Aeschines, and he's an instance of rhetor, and then he's here in English and here in ancient Greek. Okay. So now if we're talking about putting all of these together to represent a speech or speeches and the associated legal proceeding, I think that for understanding what's happening in a speech, it is so essential to have the context of what legal proceeding it's associated with. Also, this graph is not 100% representing what's going on under the hood in TEDI because there's a lot more concepts, but this is just a simplified version. So here we have these two speeches, Demosthenes 19, which has the title On the False Embassy, and Aeschines 2, which is on the embassy. And this is one of those rare occurrences in Athenian oratory where these speeches actually are opposite sides of the same case. And we don't have very much of that at all, but we can see this Aeschines 2 is a defense speech, and Demosthenes 19 is the accusation. They're both instances of a speech. Author Demosthenes, author Aeschines over here. And then we know that the charge being discussed in these is a public legal proceeding initiated in writing for accepting bribes. It would be judged by the dikasterion and supervised by the thesmothete, which are both legal bodies. And then we have in the center here what I have yet to determine, which is a legal event. So we have an event that has this type, and it is a trial between Demosthenes and Aeschines. and I have yet to model it in terms of ontology, but we have all the parts that are surrounding it. So the next step is to be able to connect these three ontoterminologies, how they all play into this one event. I've also included, because a case where we have two speeches that are actually about the same thing is very irregular, I've included what it looks like when we only have one speech. This is looking at Lysias 1, which is on the murder of Eratosthenes. We know this is a private legal proceeding for an intentional homicide. So we know the legal body that supervised it and that would judge the trial. But we don't know what speech was the accusation. That's completely lost to time. We have no idea who authored it. We don't even know who delivered it. We know that the court proceeding was probably between the man who speaks in Lysias 1, Euphylades, and the family of the murder victim, Eratosthenes, but we don't know any of their names. We don't know anything. So modeling then this event that's between a known figure and a completely unknown figure, how do we work our way around that? Which brings us to the ontology that was created by Weiner and Hoekstra in 2012 to represent legal cases. And this is representing primarily modern legal cases, mostly focused in the US and the UK. Weiner is at UCL, or was when this was written. I believe he's now at Swansea. And Hoekstra is at the University of Amsterdam. So part of their focus in the creation of this ontology is case-based reasoning, which is basing legal decisions on past precedent, and is not focused on defining legal concepts as much as it's focused on looking at how we can trace the decision of one case to the domino effect of how then other cases would be decided based on that one. It's also very domain-centric. They're not interested in modeling the events, the time, the space that happen within a case. They're just interested in representing the legal structure. They are also not focused on representing concepts that have the same structure outside of the legal system as they do inside, which basically means if your concept of, if the general concept of something like baseball, the case they use is about baseball. Baseball is the same outside of the legal system as it is inside, so they're not going to define baseball. And so their eventual purpose is to build a database of cases, which is linked by a knowledge graph in which you can see precedents and citation and have a network of influence among legal decisions. So cases within their model are underdefined, which means that in order to qualify as a case, it has to have, the property restrictions are it has to have a defendant, a plaintiff, and a judge. And then within the case has the two subclasses of decided cases and undecided cases. And then decided cases can be precedent cases or shepherdized cases. Precedent cases set a precedent, shepherdized cases follow a precedent. And then other things that they've captured that you can see in this graph are that cases have solicitors, and solicitors will be for the plaintiff or for the defendant. The case will have a name. And then there's also a hearing, which is the event of when this case takes place, and that will have a date and a physical address. Because this is modern, they're dealing with, this street name kind of address, not like a location, which you'll see in an ancient source. That's much more difficult to pin down. And the other classes that they've factored into their model are, first of all, a decision. So who is favored by the case, and what argument scheme rationale, which is the argument that's made, how that argument plays into the decision, as well as the decision date, which can often be different from the hearing date. They've also looked at jurisdiction, which is the authoritative body who adjudicates the case, which would be, like the San Francisco city court. participants, which are judges, solicitors, also reporters, court reporters, and witnesses count as participants within the case. And then they look at elements, which are evidence, legal concepts, and legal documents that are submitted. So that's your law, your witness testimony, even just facts of the situation count as evidence. So I've included also over here, this is the example that the article uses to demonstrate how the ontology works. And this case is actually very interesting. Like I said, it's about baseball. And the story is essentially there's a baseball game. The player hits, his name is Barry Bond. He hits a home run. The ball goes into the stands and the plaintiff, Popov, catches the ball. And then he gets attacked by a mob of other people in the stands. It's very American what happens here. So he gets attacked, he drops the ball rolls away. And this other guy, Hayashi, who's unrelated to the conflict, he's not one of the guys like beating him up. Hayashi picks up the ball, and then on the stadium like camera, they announce like, oh, this guy caught the ball, and the ball is worth a lot of money because the player who hit it, it was like a record-setting number of home runs for him. So it's a very valuable thing to have. So Popov sues Hayashi for the ball, because he says, well, I got it first and then I lost it. And it's this whole thing where the decision is actually that because it's not Hayashi's fault that they lost the ball, it's the unrelated third-party violent mob that they just sell the ball and split the money that they get out of it. And I think it's like in the millions how much they get out of it, which is crazy. But so basically, a little bit of a tangent, but this is just representing you know, down here we have the defendant's solicitor, but we also have an expert witness. We have the facts of the case, which are that Barry Bonds hit a home run, that there was a possibility for either of them to catch the home run. The judge was also Kevin McCarthy, which is kind of interesting because now he's was the Speaker of the House for a while. So I don't know, just a weird little thing happening. So then I wanted to look at how speeches from Athenian legal proceedings compare with this model of modern legal cases, because even though it's very interesting, there are a lot of pretty significant differences. First of all, that in Attic oratory, usually only one side's argument survives, while this model is representing both sides. Also, in Attic oratory, the final decision is rarely known. There's some speeches where they'll make a reference to a past case, and that we can kind of pick out, oh, that's how they decided that, interesting. And we even have some inscriptions which attest to a certain person in an inheritance dispute. Probably we know they got their inheritance, so good for them. But in the Weiner and Hoekstra ontology, the decision plays a very large role in the information they want to capture. But the similarities are that both cases we have participants who are outside of the two litigants. We don't just want to look at the plaintiff and the defendant. I don't have a judge to look at necessarily, but I do have usually a long list of witnesses. And then also the proceedings can be defined in both cases by the jurisdiction. So which body or group is overseeing the case is also important in both. Right. So based on their ontology, if we look at their case class, which I'm also calling a legal event here, a case has to have a plaintiff, a defendant, and a judge. And like I said, the judge is not relevant for me, but here you can see our plaintiff is Demosthenes and our defendant is Aeschines. And then there are additional properties like the hearing date and the jurisdiction. So we know that the hearing date was 343 BC and the jurisdiction would have been the dicasterion, but actually two different jurisdictions. And then decided and undecided cases, I said, is not really accurate for oratory. Not because there isn't a decision, but because we rarely know what it is. But in cases where we do know the decision, I do think it's important to make a note of that. For participants, we can say plaintiff and defendant, but there's also witness. So I've captured a witness, Aristophanes of Olynthus. And then in oratory, an extra quirk is there aren't lawyers, but you can have a supporting speaker who's basically your buddy that you call in to give half or part of a speech, sometimes even the whole thing. But so noting that that's a type of speaker that I absolutely need to capture, but it doesn't fall into one of their categories of types of speakers because there's not so much a modern equivalent. Elements. So this is where they look at evidence, legal concepts, legal documents, and within evidence, there's also many subclasses. So I've said in the speech, they reference a counsel degree. This is a type of evidence. This is a document, a legal document. There's also deposition. This is witness testimony. And there's another letter, which like a personal letter instead of a counsel decree. So this is another type of document that might appear. Being able to capture all of these external things, which another difficulty is that quite often the speech will just say law, and then the speaker will say, I'm going to cite a law, it says law, and we don't know what the law actually says. You just have to assume based on context, but you know a law is factoring in somewhere. So my reflections on this ontology with my research purposes are that this ontology is very case-centric instead of dividing it by the two sides of this, the two arguments and the two sides. And also in the US, and I'm assuming the UK court system, witnesses are often used by both sides. If a witness is presented, there's a cross-examination. It's not one side exclusively presenting a witness. Everyone gets to use that witness then. But in Attic oratory, a witness will be only used by one side because usually the witness is your friend or someone associated with you. And a lot of the times people will refuse to serve as witnesses if they don't agree with the discussion. Also precedent is that this ontology is very focused on linking between cases that set precedents to show this network of how one legal decision will impact others down the line. And oratory will also reference past cases quite often, but it's less formal. There's not a system of formal precedent that we have in modern law. And then lastly, this ontology is very focused on argument schemes, the structure of the arguments that factor into a decision. And the focus of my research is not on the rhetorical strategy of oratory, although I do think that would be a very interesting topic for future research. And if I had more than 3 years, I could see that happening, but not for now. So based on this ontology, I'm proposing a legal event class. Similar to Weiner and Hoekstra, this would have 2 necessary participants, the plaintiff and the defendant, and they don't need names because they don't always even have names. I want to include a decision if it's known. I want to specify the extra participants, so the synegary, and the witnesses. And also for me, it's important to specify which side of the case they're on, because just saying this person serves as a witness doesn't mean all that much if you're not saying who they served as a witness for. I want to be able to link the case types to the legal processes so that you can say this speech is for a event that is a trial of this kind. Dates will have to be not just single years, but a range, because a lot of the times we know it had to be after this event because it's referenced, but we don't know the exact year. And we know that this hasn't happened yet based on the way they're talking in the speech. So it's before this year. And then I want to be able to connect to the speeches. So having a property saying that the case is argued in speech X, and then a sub-property of that to specify whether it's a defense speech or an accusation speech. And then lastly, legal events, I have to be able to reference them, say that this legal event was also referenced in this other speech, even if it isn't what the speech was about. And then, so the ontology that this paper is about is actually no longer available. I spent a lot of time searching for it. Weiner has a blog where he links to the ontology, and then the link doesn't go anywhere anymore. So it goes, and it's also too modern to be directly valuable for me. I'm not going to directly incorporate it into my model, even if it was still available. And then other ontologies are Lacrimalit has an event, which is also mapped to the CIDOC CRM E7 activity event. And in both of these, participants in these events are agents. So my overall conclusions are, first of all, not being able to find the ontology made me think about the longevity of digital projects, because an ontology no longer being accessible or only being cited in a paper somewhere or being existing but not being accessible is not a unique problem to this ontology. So in building a model, if you're going to tie into other ontologies, it's very important to make sure they have support and longevity. They're being used by other projects, not just for interoperability, but also so that your model doesn't end up broken a few years down the line. But also, for me, this exploration was important in terms of defining what is important for me to capture from legal events. So I have a goal of an overarching prosopography of the people, mostly that are mentioned within Athenian law events. But also I know that knowledge of the legal events is crucial, like the structure of the Athenian law system is crucial for contextualizing and categorizing these speeches. This also helped me to conclude that the shape of law arguments is not my focus, and that including the witnesses and the participants is important for the creation of a prosopography, but not for me to argue how a speech uses witnesses. And thank you for your attention. Here's the citation for this article if you do want to read it. It is very interesting, especially if you're interested in baseball, I guess. Thank you.